R&B has always been my favorite music genre, even though my peers always coined it as sad music or music that puts you in your feelings. I've always appreciated the art of R&B music. R&B is, quote, a distinctly African American music drawing from the deep tributaries of African American expressive culture. It is an amalgam of jump blues, big band swing, gospel, boogie, and blues that was initially developed during a 30-year period that bridges the era of legally sanctioned racial segregation, international conflicts, and the struggle for civil rights. Its formal qualities, stylistic range, marketing and consumption trends, and worldwide currency today thus reflect not only the changing social and political landscapes of American race relations, but also urban life, culture, and popular entertainment in mainstream America. Honestly, I could not have explained it better. Welcome to my channel. My name is Kiara, but I go by K Sheree online. And although this is my only video up so far, I do intend to post video essays exploring a plethora of topics, including music, Black history, and pop culture, as well as lifestyle videos and any other random videos that may come to mind. Before we get into today's video, I am going to ask that you guys like, comment, and subscribe, all that good stuff. And then we can go ahead and jump right into it. Before we really deep dive into R&B history though, we will have to take a look at some American history, and we'll start with the Great Migration. The first Great Migration, occurring from 1910 to 1940, was partially the result of World War I. At this time, Black people in the South faced a myriad of issues, including racial violence, Jim Crow, and unpaid or underpaid labor. When World War I began, Black Southerners saw this as an opportunity to escape the harsh realities of the South, as the factories, steel mills, and railroads needed to replace the white workers that were sent off to war. There was also a pause in European immigration to the United States, further exacerbating the labor shortage in the North and West. Between 1910 and 1920, the Black population in major northern cities grew exponentially, with New York's Black population growing by 66%, Chicago by 148%, Philadelphia by 500%, and Detroit by 611%. When they settled into their new homes, these newcomers could expect to make up to 3 times the amount of money they were making in the South. With these higher wages, they expected to receive better treatment, get an education, and provide a better life for themselves and those that came after them. After arriving in these cities, African Americans still face a lot of racial injustices. They were often given the lowest paying and most dangerous jobs and densely packed into neighborhoods such as Harlem in New York City or Central Avenue in Los Angeles, amongst a lot of other racial injustices. Nonetheless, quote, Blacks began to build a new place for themselves in public life, actively confronting racial prejudice as well as economic, political, and social challenges to create a Black urban culture that would exert enormous influence in the decades to come. In August of 1920, Mamie Smith recorded the song Crazy Blues, which was a commercial success among African American buyers. It sold between 10,000 and 2 million copies, and it showed record executives how successful Black musicians and Black music can be. Although Mamie Smith was not the first blues singer and Crazy Blues was not the first blues record, this type of music was often performed by white artists and catered to a white clientele. Mamie Smith's success with this record opened up a new lane for Black musicians, and this new market came to be known as Race Records. The label for this new genre, Race Records, stems from the AAVE term race man, which was very popular among the Black community in the 1920s to express racial pride and solidarity. White record executives thought that Black people were only interested in music made by other Black people, thus solidifying this term of race records or race music. Race records was used to describe all music recorded by African Americans at this time, including blues, jazz, and gospel, and produced records from artists such as Bessie Smith, Ida Cox, and Ma Rainey. The music this genre encompassed: blues, jazz, jump blues, pop, gospel. All of these genres will go on to become foundations of later R&B music. In 1929, the stock market crashed, beginning the period known as the Great Depression. This, in turn, slowed down migration in the United States as a lot of people fell on hard times economically. But with the start of World War II in 1941, migration seemed to pick back up. According to the National Archives, World War II brought an expansion to the nation's defense industry and many more jobs for African Americans and other locales, again encouraging a massive migration that was active until about the 1970s. Quote, between 1941 and 1950, the African American population of Western cities grew by 33%, with about 340,000 African Americans from such states as Texas, Louisiana, and Oklahoma settling in Southern California for employment in the region's expanded defense industries. Similar patterns of migration took place in the Midwest to Chicago and Detroit, and in the East to New York City. From 1910 until about 1970, approximately 6 million African Americans moved from southern states such as Florida, Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee, and escaped north and west to places such as Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., California, and Chicago. Before the Great Migration, about 90% of African Americans lived in the South. After the Great Migration, about half, 47%, lived in the northern and western cities they fled to. With this second boom of migration came the early development of R&B music. As I've stated before, Black people still face a lot of racial disparities when they move to these northern and western cities. One example is the redlining and restrictive covenants that were placed on certain areas, barring African Americans from purchasing homes or living in certain neighborhoods. This further segregated the northern and western cities that Black people fled to, forcing them to live in the already overcrowded Black communities that already existed. Writes Isabel Wilkerson for History.com, in densely populated destinations like Pittsburgh and Harlem, housing was so scarce that some Black workers had to share the same single bed in shifts. The rise in population in these African American urban communities gave birth to lively entertainment scenes, which helped create R&B music. Although the term race records or race music stuck, the genre would officially go on to change its name to rhythm and blues in 1949. Although the name was not officially changed until 1949, Jerry Wexler, the Billboard writer who went on to become co-head of Atlantic Records from 1953 to 1975, began to use this name for the genre 2 years prior, in 1947. At this time, R&B music mainly used acoustic instruments and was looked at as lowbrow in comparison to jazz. By the late 1950s, R&B music was more electric and plugged in. Between the end of World War II and the early 1960s, R&B music was the most popular music made by and for African Americans in the United States. Early R&B music was mostly recorded in Los Angeles by small independent record labels such as Modern or RPM. But in 1947, Atlantic Records opened in New York, shifting the industry center to the East Coast. The label was started by Ahmet Ertegun and Herb Abramson. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing their names wrong. But in 1953, Jerry Wexler, the man who coined the title R&B, also joined their team. Other influential record labels at this time for R&B music were King Records in Cincinnati, Ohio, The Chess in Chicago, and Peacock Records out of Houston, Texas. By the mid to late 1950s, R&B music began to change. It was no longer considered music for Black youth, as rock and roll, which contained more mature themes, was often lumped in with R&B music. Because there was no clear distinction between R&B and rock and roll music at this time, a lot of artists had music that could fit into either category. With this change, a lot of guitar-led electric blues music, hailing from places such as Memphis and Chicago, began to take over the charts, changing the sound for R&B music. Early pioneers of this transition, such as Ike Turner, will go on to become legendary and change R&B music forever. On August 23rd, 1969, Billboard changed the title of this genre again, this time to soul music. This title change stemmed from the change in much of the themes of R&B music, which reflected the changing social climate in America. With the civil rights movement on the rise and anti-war rhetoric spreading throughout the nation, R&B artists wanted to express how they felt through their music. Songs such as Sam Cooke's A Change Is Gonna Come and James Brown's Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud came to be born during this time. Soul music went on to become its own category separate from R&B in later years. In 1979, Kenny Gamble, co-founder of Philadelphia International Records, introduced Black Music Month, concurrently launching the Black Music Association. The Black Music Association began lobbying to change the title of the genre to Black music, which the public eventually adopted in 1982. For the next decade, Black music would be the term to describe all popular music made by African American artists. In 1990, the genre had yet another name change. At this time, more white artists began to adopt popular Black music styles. Because of this, the genre was again named R&B. The sound of R&B also began changing in the 90s, as another popular Black music genre, hip-hop, was on the rise. R&B and hip-hop artists and producers began to collaborate and mix these music styles, essentially blurring the lines between the two categories. Songs such as Destiny Child's Say My Name and Usher's Confessions Part 2 are examples of this. There were also artists who stuck to more ballad-style sounds, such as Alicia Keys' Fallin' and Aaliyah's Miss You. In the 2010s and 2020s, R&B music has changed significantly. In the early 2010s, EDM producers such as Calvin Harris collaborated with R&B artists to add their own spin on the genre. For example, Rihanna's We Found Love. Newer artists such as Seven Streeter and Her have added their own contemporary take on ballad-style sounds, bringing us beautiful music. The latest and newest change in R&B music is the influence of Jamaican dancehall and Afrobeats on the genre. Artists such as Burna Boy are beginning to take over the charts, and I'm sure we can expect to see a lot of similar artists beginning to pop up in the future. So that is all I have for today's video about the history of R&B music. There was a lot of information that I found that I could have included, but I just didn't want to make this video too long. So if there's anything important that I missed, you guys can comment it down below. Thank you guys so much from the bottom of my heart if you watched this entire video. I want to ask that you guys again like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want some more content from me, you can catch me on TikTok at K Sheree. I'll make sure I have the name on the screen at the bottom here. But yeah, thank you guys again for watching. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you guys in the future. Bye.